Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bravard. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and today we're going to talk some NBA. We're going to talk some NFL, some big news in the NFL recently. Most recently, and most tragically, Logan, Geno Smith cut by the toothless, useless Raiders.
Thank God he can go to a franchise that will actually appreciate him, and he's going to thrive, and he's going to go back to being the best quarterback in the National Football League, buddy.
Logan, you're so right. Sometimes, and Geno has experienced this personally, you got to ride the lows to get back to the highs, and that's what we're going to see with Geno wherever he goes next. What a talent, what a guy. We'll talk about that later along with other NFL stuff, but we're going to start with some big NBA news, Logan. In fact, some of the biggest news of the season. Jayson Tatum is officially coming back for the Boston Celtics, not just this season, most likely tonight, certainly very soon. This has been an ongoing story. Is he going to come back? Is he not going to come back? Now that we officially know he will be returning, Logan, what does that mean for the Boston Celtics and their contention hopes this season?
I mean, for me, it makes them the second best team in the East, or the second favorite to me in the East. They're definitely a legit contender. I thought that way before Tatum was fully announced.
Way before, buddy. Don't try to claim the side that I've been on. I had to convince you over months.
Yeah, but I mean, I got there. I may have been a little late, but I got there. Better late than never.
True that.
I still lean on Cleveland. I still would take Cleveland to win the East if you put a gun to my head. But the thing about Tatum's game that makes this so interesting is, one, all the really talented and really valuable role players that Boston has already found this season that are awesome and can contribute. You know, it's not just the top guys, Jaylen Brown flourishing. It's Peyton Pritchard fully blossoming into the player that he's been this season. It's finding guys at the end of the bench like Jordan Walsh and Hugo Gonzalez and Neemias Queta that have, just really made Boston a complete team. And it's Tatum's skill set that, where a guy like him, you don't worry about Tatum as much as other guys about messing it up or messing the flow up. I think the Brown-Tatum dynamic is probably the thing I'm most nervous about if I had to pick anything out, just them striking that balance between less of them playing, oh, this is my possession, this is your possession, and more just having this free-flowing ease on offense. But Tatum's skill set is so well-rounded that he is a player that I expect to just drop him in there, and he's going to be able to pick up defensive assignments and guard 1 through 5 and end possessions and dominate the glass the way he normally can. To do all of these connective things that Tatum does, like a lot of superstars, you would be worried about them coming back mid-season. That is the one area that I'm a little bit concerned is Tatum's jumper going to be there, are his legs going to be under him, like little things like that of any guy returning from injury. But Tatum does so many little things for a basketball team that I think it should be a pretty seamless fit. And it's like the Boston Celtics are already great without a guy that I would tell you is a top 10 player in basketball. And so if Tatum comes back and he looks like a top 20 guy, Boston can come out of the East, easily. And I don't think that Tatum needs to do a whole ton. I think it's going to be a ramp-up period. I think it'll be, they should have him on a minutes restriction for, the first few months, ease him back in, make sure that his body's good, that he's ready for the physicality of games and stuff like that. But I think Boston, at the worst, has leapfrogged themselves to being my second favorite team in the East. There's another team that I'm souring on a little bit. There's a team that's streaking right now that I think is climbing up in my Eastern hierarchy. But at the worst, I think Boston's a top 2 team in the East. I do believe in Cleveland a little bit more. I think offense is going to come a little bit easier to Cleveland.
That's fair. I think that those are definitely the top 2. Those are the 2 that I've been advocating for a long time. I think they definitely have the highest two-way ceilings, just so much offensive firepower and legit high-end defensive personnel. First off, just what a dream season this has been for the Boston Celtics. It felt like pretty much everyone had conceded, myself very much included, this was going to be a transitional season for them. It seemed like best case scenario, Tatum would be ready to come back just for the playoffs, at which point my thinking was, why risk it? You're not going to be a championship caliber team with him on the floor. and they have just overachieved so dramatically. They have been such an impressive team in so many ways. Tatum has gotten healthier faster than I ever could have expected, where now it's not like you're dropping him into the fire. He's got a 20-game runway to work his way into form going into the playoffs, and he's being dropped onto a team that is second in offensive rating, seventh in defensive rating, third in net rating, like objectively one of the very best teams in basketball without him. I thought this team was going to go like 500 because, of course, we talk about the absence of Tatum, but you can't forget all the other offseason departures, Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday and Al Horford and Luke Cornett, who they have just made up for so masterfully with the depth finds that they've had on this roster, with the brilliant coaching of Joe Mazzulla, with a number of key guys stepping up, with a change in this offensive system, with just a hard-nosed identity that emphasizes the margins. Truly, I don't think there's been a more impressive team in basketball this year than the Celtics. There certainly hasn't been a more impressive testament to a team's culture, to their coaching, to their front office. Just what an organization. And honestly, that's part of what makes me comfortable with Tatum coming back so fast. The Celtics are just a prime organization, and I don't think they would do something medically irresponsible. Tatum has been doing on-court work for months. Like, this ramp-up has been gradual. It's just not quite an unprecedented recovery time from an Achilles, but in recent history, pretty much. It's the fastest return from any like actual rotation player that we've seen in a decade. So it's just incredible on that front. The possibilities that this team has this season that I don't think any of us could have expected coming into the year. And in terms of what it does mean for the Celtics now at this point, I'm extremely high on this team, and I'm extremely optimistic about how Jayson Tatum can help them, even if he isn't 100% right off the bat, which I don't think he will be, but even if he plays all year at a level where he's like 85% of his usual self, he can be such a positive contributor to this team because his superpower as a player is versatility, the ability to impact the game in multiple ways. That's going to be such a great benefit to this team because they already have a base system that is so effective. But when it comes to giving them more options offensively, you have to understand the Celtics offensive system has changed a lot from last year. This was a team that in previous seasons was really predicated upon mismatch attacking. Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, and pretty much everybody spread in space around them, and that's how they weaponized their shooting. These guys being threats off the catch, playing off of these big forwards who were mostly going to look to get into isolation, work out of the high post, and attack a mismatch they liked. It was a very effective offense, but it was more stagnant. In the absence of Tatum, and also with Porzingis being gone, of course, they've shifted to a much more pick and roll heavy approach. They're playing a lot more through their guards offensively, Pritchard and White. And there's also just more layers to this offense. There's more player movement. There's more handoffs. It's just overall a more fluid offense. And I don't think Jayson Tatum has to be at odds with that. Like, I do think mismatch attacking is definitely part of his preference as a player. And I think that's something you can turn to in spots. Again, it's just another option. It's another weapon to have. But I also think he can fit into this more fluid pick and roll system. He can be used as an elite catch and shooter playing off the ball, which he is. He can be used as a screener in this offense, right? Somebody who can integrate into those actions and allow these guards to continue to handle. And of course, he's somebody who can be a volume pick and roll ball handler himself and is a really strong passer. So he brings positive value there. Offensively, I just think there's so many ways that he can fit in and provide a positive impact. And then when you do get down to the nitty gritty of some of these matchups, like, again, I think having such an elite switch beating big forward like Jayson Tatum, who can beat you as a scorer and passer out of those looks, it's another really valuable layer to have in your offense. It just overall, having a guy who can be a lead ball handler like that, who I trust much more as a passer, as a playmaker than Jaylen Brown, who at times I think can struggle to strike that balance, and as a ball handler too. Like, I do think it's reasonable to expect some slight growing pains just because this is a different system and you are dropping in a high usage player, but Jayson Tatum doesn't have to dominate the ball to be super effective here. And I don't think the Celtics in any way have to adhere to the way that they've played offense previously, because with their new personnel, that's not the best system for them. And I think Tatum has enough versatility as an offensive player to absolutely make this work. And not make them a substantially better bottom line offense, because that's not really possible when you're already the number 2 offense in the NBA. But again, just give them more variety in terms of their offensive attack. And then defensively, I think he's just as impactful, if not more so, because of, again, the versatility. He just unlocks different looks for this team. I think it's so impressive that they're already 7th in defensive rating. Like, that's playing above their talent level. But having a big forward who, as you said, can anchor the defensive glass and who just gives you so many options. He's just such a versatile chess piece on that side of the ball, on both sides of the ball. But they do have a couple of centers who are pretty rigid schematically, who are true drop bigs. That's where Jayson Tatum just totally changes the dynamics of your pick and roll defense, where if you're going up against a great pick and roll attack, an offense that is super proficient and comfortable against drop coverage, we have seen Jayson Tatum previously match up with centers and give you the ability to switch everything in those looks, and he can guard on the perimeter. His matchup versatility is so impressive that you can take an offense out of their element like that. He just gives them more answers on both sides of the ball. It's really that simple, and that's the sort of thing that elevates this team from very good to legitimately great, because they already have an abundance of ball handling and shooting around him, and they have really good depth, and they are the best coach team in the NBA. And that's another part that makes me so confident about Tatum coming back. Like, he is going to be deployed on both sides of the ball by the smartest coach in the NBA. Are you really that worried about him coming in here and like not being used properly when Joe Mazzulla is making the decisions? I'm not. I think he's going to get the most out of Tatum, just like he's gotten the most out of every single player on this roster this year. So if I had to choose, I would say the Celtics are my favorites in the East. I think both they and Cleveland have extremely high offensive ceilings. I do think that Boston's defensive ceiling is even a little bit higher, and I do think they have even a little bit more offensive variety, and they definitely have more ball handling. I'm optimistic about James Harden in Cleveland, but the Cavs are very reliant on him as a second creator. The Celtics here have like 4 legit perimeter creators and good play finishing around them with all the shooting. So I think this team is not just the biggest dogs in the East. I think that they're probably the biggest threat to OKC in the entire NBA, presuming that we get a version of Tatum that is like somewhat close to his usual self.
Yeah, the last sentence that you just said is the key thing to me. I just need to see it with Tatum before I'm ready to say that Boston's there. I think they would need Tatum. And I'm not going to make any big declarations like a week or two in. Again, like you said, like this full ramp-up period is going to be important to just keep an eye on before we get into the playoffs, because I don't think that Tatum's going to be going balls to the walls immediately out of the gate and fully exerting himself. And maybe his jump shot won't be there, for the first couple of weeks. We don't really know. I just need to see it. Cleveland, I just really believe in their offense, man. I know Harden had that thumb injury to his offhand, and that was a concern to some people, and Harden's playoff droppings are a concern and stuff like that. But I just really believe in this Cleveland offense, man, with all the talent that they have, with all the play finishers, I just think Cleveland's a little bit more talented, I would say, is my thing with them versus Boston. And it's close. I think both these teams are really talented. The depth is really close with both these. Both these teams are really just great. The benches are great for both units. I just think Cleveland's a little bit more talented than them. But it's going to be a dogfight, man. I mean, the East is just way better than I expected coming into this season. I thought that it was going to be a joke, whoever came out of it. But I do look at either of these teams, if it is Boston or Cleveland, I would look at them as legit threats to go toe-to-toe with whoever comes out of the Western Conference. Maybe not beat them. I think I'm just going to lean on OKC if they come out of the West. But it's going to be more competitive. But I like Cleveland's offense, and I like their talent just a little bit more than Boston's.
Look, you're preaching to the choir on Cleveland propaganda, but I do think you have to look at the perimeter defensive personnel here. That's a meaningful difference to me. Like, it's really difficult for teams to have the personnel to guard 2 big, powerful wings like Tatum and Brown, and now a small guard, shifty, elite pull-up shooter like a Peyton Pritchard, and Derek White is so useful in this offense. Like, again, there's just so many sources of perimeter offense who can create and who can also finish plays as catch and shooters. And you look at a roster like Cleveland's, and it's like, Jalen Tyson has a huge defensive burden on his plate, and he can take on one of those matchups. And he's like legitimately quite good at guarding the archetype, specifically of like a Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, I'd put Tyson on Brown. I'd put Mobley on Tatum, and I'd live with it.
Yeah. Mobley has shown an ability to guard Tatum relatively well, but I do think there's just more perimeter offensive talent for Boston than there is perimeter defensive talent for Cleveland, whereas I feel like Boston's defensive personnel is much closer to matching up because they have an elite point of attack defender like Derek White. They have multiple more quality perimeter defenders like a Jaylen Brown, a Jayson Tatum, you can throw at a James Harden in stretches. And so I just think they have fewer entry points on that side of the ball. I'd hear the argument that that's offset by the elite rim protection that you get with Cleveland's bigs, but I do think there's a reason that Boston has been the better defense this team, and also something that I never have to worry about Boston. I would agree with you on paper, Cleveland is the more talented team, but Boston, again, has squeezed every last bit out of their talent this entire season because they are so buttoned up in their execution. They are an elite team offensively in terms of never turning the ball over, creating margin on the offensive glass, but defensively, in terms of transition defense, they're one of the best in the NBA. They have so many guys who are just such dogged competitors, and at times I have questioned a little bit just that intensity from Cleveland, from several guys on their roster. So that's where I do slightly prefer Boston. And then again, I do think as good as the combination of Cleveland's pick and roll offense with the play finishing, the shooting they have around their two-star guards, and the bigs who can finish plays around the rim, like, it's an elite combination. Again, I have been a Cleveland propagandist. I've been a Boston propagandist. If these two teams are playing for the Eastern Conference, it's a big win in my book. Like, I've been pushing the agenda for those two teams, and I do think that they're the two best in the conference come playoff time. But I do think because of the combination of the pick and roll attack with Boston, but also that ability now with Tatum back in the fold to go more mismatch attacking mode. Like, there's just a little bit more variety there. So I'm slightly more confident in them, but like, it is super marginal, and it probably does come down to what level Jayson Tatum is at. I'm just very optimistic there, and I think we have no reason to be anything but extremely optimistic about this Boston team considering everything they've done. And I think a lot of the concerns about like Tatum coming in and there being some sort of conflict between him and Brown, like, I think that's overplayed. I hope that's not it. And if Jayson Tatum isn't able to really positively contribute to this situation, that will probably lower my opinion of him as a basketball player, because he's the sort of superstar who I do think you should be able to slot into a situation like this. I mean, we'll have to see how it plays out. Like, maybe it would be a resistance from Brown to concede it all or something like that. But I just think Tatum should absolutely be able to find ways to positively contribute for this team on both sides of the ball.
I don't know. I'm willing to give Tatum some grace. I mean, just coming back from the injury, I don't even know if I can make anything. Like, even if he's like, negative coming out the gate, I don't know if I'll be able to take anything big away from Tatum as a player, even if he doesn't look great. I mean,
I'm saying more philosophically, if he doesn't embrace being that Swiss Army knife specifically for this team, if he's like, hey, no matter what, it's going to be a lot of iso ball mismatch
like
attacking
this is my
from
team
me.
kind of shit.
If he's like, regardless of whether my step back three is falling, I'm going to put up 5 of them a game, like, that's where I'm saying I would be critical of him. Not if literally he just doesn't 100% have it physically, or if the shot isn't all the way there. Like, it's just if he doesn't play the right way, which I've seen a lot of people talk about being concerned about. I'm really not. We're getting into a hypothetical I don't think is going to come up, because I think Jayson Tatum, the thing I commend about him most is he's a winner. He makes winning plays, and Boston has a culture of winning. They have an incredibly smart basketball culture. I think he's part of that.
Yeah, I mean, the pivot is amazing. Like, all the turnover that you talked about, man, even down to the move that they made at the deadline, flipping Simons for Vucevic, right? Like, that was a really smart deal to shore up their big man rotation. The player development, Boston, I just think, is the best organization probably in basketball, and I would give it to them over like an OKC too, just because I think they're in both of these teams, their internal development is so amazing. Like, all the players that they draft and their ability to find gems late in drafts, like, top to bottom, they're class acts, man. And I don't know, I can't think of a team that you were talking about this earlier, that has just subverted expectations the way Boston has coming into a season, man. I can't think of a team that has had this much roster turnover coming into a season, and then this low of expectations coming into a season, and then drastically overachieved like this. Like, if you had told me Boston was going to go 500, I'd say, yeah, that's about right. Or they win 45 games, I go, okay. You tell me they're a damn near top 5 team on both sides of the floor and they're top 5 in net rating, I would have said you're crazy. It's unbelievable, man. Shout out Missoula and shout out Brad Stevens, dude.
Seriously, I think if we are ranking the various components of those two organizations, because I think that Boston and Oklahoma City are the two best in the game right now, just in terms of that organizational excellence. The best coach in basketball is Joe Mazzulla. I think he adds the most, both schematically but also just culturally, and again, emphasizing the right principles. And then I think in terms of the GM, it's Sam Presti. I think Brad Stevens is really good, but the record that Presti has of drafting is absolutely absurd. And I do think player development, I would also give the edge to OKC. Like, what they have just built from the ground up is really outstanding. But what Boston has been able to sustain, I mean, with so many different changes around Tatum and Brown over the years, is incredible. And by the way, when you talk about one of the single most impactful moves, the credit for this goes to Danny Ainge, but the Derek White trade was just unbelievable. That guy is a natural-born winner. I think they should call him Mr. Celtic. He, embodies everything that is great about this franchise right now and has been so impactful this year. Even if he isn't making his shots at the usual clip, he just does so many things that positively impact the game.
And it's funny that you bring up Derek White. I have a running joke with my friends that I play basketball with, and I tell them if you're ever wondering what you should do on the basketball court, you should ask yourself, what would Derek White do?
That's real as hell.
If you think about it and you envision what he would do, you just do that, and then you make the right play 100% of the time. It's actually foolproof. I was going to say Danny Ainge deserves credit, too, for just getting Tatum and Brown, because, those picks stem back from the Brooklyn Nets trade where they recognized it. I was just hitting OKC with the tanking tax. I do think Presti's brilliant, but also interrelated with that. If they hadn't sucked ass, you don't get Chet Holmgren. I don't know. Boston was never in the dredges like that.
Top pick that they benefited from in the rebuild, though. They picked J-Dub 12th. They traded for Shea, and they've just made so many ridiculous
I know, but that's just the
Aaron
that's
Wiggins,
the very
55th. They got AJ
That's the
Mitchell,
small component that makes me lean Boston.
All right. Well, I guess at this point we can get into our criteria for best organization. I think those are the two. I think it's no coincidence they've won the last two titles, and I think it's possible that they are on a collision course to meet in the finals this year, which would be absolutely electric. That being said, we do have Boston-Cleveland coming up on Sunday, which is going to be a whole lot of fun just to see some of the particulars of that matchup. I can't wait. I love both these teams, and like you said, I just think the Eastern Conference has gotten so much better and so much more interesting as this year has gone along, and those two teams are the two real late-season risers, both bringing in a key star piece, Harden for the Cavs and Tatum for the Celtics. I can't wait to see how this plays out, but I'm very, very optimistic about Tatum coming back for the Celtics. There's another top dog out east, though, Logan. The top dog in the standings, the number one seed, that had a little bit of a rougher week so far. They've dropped back-to-back games, one to Cleveland, and then another one to San Antonio last night. This is a pretty fun matchup. Two very physical, defensive-minded, young, athletic teams having great, unexpectedly so, great seasons. And the Spurs have gotten the better of this matchup both the times we've seen it over the last couple weeks. What did you take away from that Spurs-Pistons game?
I mean, mostly I'm just souring on Detroit as a contender, and I'm still very worried about Cade and the Pistons offense come playoff time. I mean, I think that has to be your takeaway. You mentioned it. They've lost back-to-back games, San Antonio and Cleveland. Their last loss, their only other loss right now post-All-Star break, was also to San Antonio. And I think San Antonio is a really good matchup for this team, but also you just see some things that got to really make you worry about this offense, and specifically Cade goes 10 of 26 in their loss versus San Antonio last night. He was 4 of 16 versus Cleveland in their loss 2 games ago, and just recently, too, goes 11 of 25 versus Orlando. There's just so much offensive responsibility and so much on the plate of Cade Cunningham, too much so. I think there's just too much on Cade's plate, and that's what's going to come back to bite Detroit on the ass and what's probably going to eliminate them in a 7-game playoff series, because really it's not a game-to-game concern. It's more of a playoff series and a playoff run. One, I worry about Cade wearing down over the duration of an actual playoff run, getting into later series, even if Detroit is able to escape out of the first round. Just that kind of physical toll that it's going to take on Cade. Right, and he can do it over a regular season, and you can balance it. The playoffs are a different kind of a beast. It's more brutal. It's more physical. It's, the games are, you have less breaks between games. I do worry about Cade in that respect. And then just the consistency of the guys around him and the lack of real creators throughout the roster. That is so clearly and obviously what Detroit needed to address at the deadline, and Kevin Huerter's just not the answer. Like, he just doesn't have the skill set, and nobody on this roster has the skill set of the guy that they need.
Yeah.
There's just no other shot creators or advantage creators throughout this roster. I love Dennis Jenkins. Dennis Jenkins is a great two-guard and complement to Cade Cunningham. He does all the little things. He's got great positioning. He's a really good shooter. He can handle in spots for you, but he's not going to create advantages. Karis LeVert, that's a joke. Marcus Sasser, he's a good floor spacer. I like him, but you need a guy that you can legitimately put the ball in their hands and either go get you a tough bucket in isolation, or you need a guy that can create dribble penetration and kick out. Just a guy that you depend on to put the ball in his hands. And there's just a redundancy with some of the guys, and I think that Detroit's going to have to address this in the offseason. So maybe I'm jumping the shark with this talk, but there is an overabundance and a bit of a redundancy in some of the archetypes in this roster where Huerter is a guy that I would just let walk. Where you look at a guy like Duncan Robinson, you don't need to bring Kevin Huerter back. Duncan Robinson's given you everything that you need out of a guy like Kevin Huerter. And Huerter has barely even played for this team. You look at on the wings, Asar Thompson, I hope he gets back healthy. He rolled his ankle the other night. Like him and Ron Holland. I like Ron Holland a lot, and I think he's going to develop into a solid NBA player, but you just need more skill, and you need to cash in and trade in one of these guys. If it's Paul Reed or Beef Stew, you've got Duren. I like this team's depth. I love their identity. They have got dogs and mean, nasty SOBs up and down this roster. You're going to have to cash in one of these defensive-minded guys or just depth pieces that don't really get a ton of burn. You're going to have to let them walk. And it sucks, right? At the beginning of this season, I was optimistic and I was hopeful that Jaden Ivey would be the solution to this problem, that he could be the athletic downhill force and guy that could create advantages and get his own bucket. That didn't come to fruition. And unfortunately, Ivey has just seemed to hit a little bit of a wall in terms of his development. I hope he can blossom in Chicago. I loved him as a prospect. He was not the guy that Detroit needed. And Detroit didn't go and get that guy at the deadline. And so you just know what's going to get Detroit in the playoffs. It is staring us squarely in the face. We have seen it too many games. And it's not really it's a little bit of a Cade thing, but I hesitate to even blame Cade for some of his own shortcomings just because of how much responsibility offensively is on his plate. There's no margin for error for Cade. If Cade is going to have a game like this in the playoffs, they're going to lose. And I just think they need another guy.
That's actually not necessarily true. I mean, they've won some Cade stinkers just because the defense has been that good, and they managed to even keep it close against the Cavs when he shot 4 of 16. I fundamentally agree with your point. I just don't want to take away the credit of how great this Pistons team is defensively, how great they are on the offensive glass. They do create real margin in those ways, but there does come a point where the offense, the half-court offense, just has to be better than this. In a lot of ways, what they have sort of built here is similar philosophically to OKC. Now, very different approaches in terms of just the size and physicality and force that they emphasize, whereas OKC has been much more about speed and perimeter talent. But in terms of building a team that is very defensively oriented and full of dogs and pretty much entrusting your offense to one guard and saying, all right, we need you to pick up this entire side of the ball for us. The differences are just OKC still has better offensive supporting talent, and the lack of shooting, particularly in Detroit, is so glaring. And then Shea is also a substantially better offensive player than Cade Cunningham. So there's just a couple ways in which this formula is not going to cut it in a title run, in my opinion.
Well, and that's the thing is the spacing is maybe one of the biggest issues. Is I just see them in a playoff run with whatever combination of players that they go with. I love Ron Holland. I'm sagging off of him every possession. I will play in the gaps and I will play in help on Cade Cunningham or whatever other guard is on the court, and I'll let him shoot. Same goes for Asar Thompson. Same goes for any big that is roaming around the perimeter, if it's Paul Reed or Beef Stew. The offense just isn't good enough. And I don't want to take away from those guys defensively, and
Right.
and I don't, because that is a huge component of why this team is great. It's their ability to dominate the interior. They have the best point in the paint margin in basketball. Like, those are superpowers, but there just comes a point where I do think there's a few too many guys. And also, the offensively slanted guys on this team suck. All of them, except for Duncan. Like,
Yeah.
Herter is a non-starter. Karis LeVert.
Right.
Like, these are guys that should not be getting serious minutes on a real basketball team.
I totally agree. I mean, the roster is just too slanted towards defense. And then, like you said, I've been saying all this same stuff about the Pistons all year. Even as they've totally overachieved my expectations, I've just been saying, compared to the top tier of the East, I can't buy it in terms of a title run because I'm too worried about this offense. They need more shooting. They need more creation. And they had an opportunity to address that at the deadline. And I don't think I was hard enough on the Herter move. At the time, I was like, this is underwhelming. At least they tried to address the need with shooting, but it was hilarious, dude. I saw this post from Automatic NBA, great follow on Twitter yesterday, and he'll post the players who have added the most value through shooting this year, and then the players who have been the worst shooters in the NBA in terms of value that they're costing their team through shooting. Kevin Herter, this guy who obviously everybody thinks of as a shooter, that's what he does on the basketball court, was on the worst shooters list, man. Like, he's been terrible from three this year. He's 30%. He hasn't even shot well from the mid-range or from the free throw line. And so he gets here. He's like their one move at the deadline, and the guy doesn't even play more often than not. He's made 2 threes for them.
I was going to say, dude,
since they
73
traded
total
for
minutes. He's 2 of 12.
So that was just a total miss. And there were budget good offensive guards to be had, like, who would have cost you more than Kevin Herter. But are you not willing to give up 4 second-round picks to get Ayo Dosunmu? Because that's somebody who could change your season. That's somebody who does have those dimensions of off-ball shooting and on-ball creation and speed, who could actually take you up a level and is so much better than the alternatives, like you're saying, of a LeVert or a Jenkins. I think that's a huge missed opportunity for Detroit that really is going to hurt them this postseason.
The other guy I thought of is a guy they had just last year. I was like, damn, man. Dennis Schroeder would have been awesome to bring back for this basketball team.
For sure. But I'm just looking like you were going bargain hunting with the Chicago Bulls, and it wasn't a Kobe White who was there to be had and affordably, and Ayo is also on a reasonable contract. Like, you easily could have made those deals work, and instead you go with Kevin Herter. I really do think that was very unfortunate for them. And obviously the headline with Detroit in terms of the concern is just the half-court offense. It's what I've been saying all year about this team, but they're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the NBA. They lack ball handling. They lack shooting outside of Cade. And this is a really tough matchup for Cade. And Cade has run into some really tough matchups. Like, you put him up against an elite athlete, a big, strong, 6'6" kind of perimeter defender like a Stephon Castle, that's a tough matchup for him. He is not going to be able to physically impose himself or create separation or get by that guy when he works against him in isolation. And then out of pick and roll, the Spurs are just so difficult to score on, because you could put Wemby in drop, the most impactful drop defender in the NBA, as a deterrent, who can also take away any lob passes or interior passes to Duren because he's just so massive. He takes up so much space. And at the same time, you've got a guy like Castle who is just applying elite back pressure. It's really hard for Cade to score or be effective overall against those sort of looks. Like, really the only thing he can do is get to the mid-range game, which he is good at, but that's still not efficient offense. Like, he's going to shoot 45% or so from mid-range. That's a win for the defense overall if you're forcing him into a lot of those shots. And at the same time, he's got a guy like Castle bearing down on him, where Castle blocked a pull-up three in this game as the trailing defender. And you felt like he was sort of speeding up some of those mid-range attempts. And all the while, it's like, if Cade tries to drive, what Wemby can do is just absurd. Cade kind of gets blocked a lot for being a really good offensive player. I think part of that is just the lack of explosiveness around the basket. He got blocked multiple times again in this game. So that's a really tough matchup. And we've seen some of these other key matchups give Cade trouble. Like, Cleveland, dude, has had Cade in hell this year, specifically Jalen Tyson, my Cal Bears GOAT. He's like built in a lab to guard a player like Cade because he matches his build so closely. He's 6'6" and stocky and strong, and he moves his feet really well, so he can just mirror his movements and stay in front. And again, Cade can't use his physicality, which is usually his advantage. Physicality, size, and then shot making over the top. It's not going to work against a guy like Jaylen Tyson, who can match him so much in those physical categories. Cade Cunningham has shot 34% from the field versus Cleveland this year over 4 games.
Yeah, Tyson had a really good trailing block on Cade, too.
Yeah.
They've been saying, I saw some report, they were like, somebody's been showing him Royce O'Neal tape to get him up
He's
to
already
snuff
better
defensively. This is a side effect of Detroit not having another really good creator, though, is it's like a team like Cleveland, say if Detroit had a second creator, you would be able to potentially exploit the fact that they don't have multiple really good perimeter defenders in the starting lineup, right? And so that's just another thing that you could make as a blanket statement for any matchup against Detroit. As long as you only have one of those guys, you don't need anybody else against Detroit because there's nobody else that really scares you all that much from the perimeter.
No, it's a really good point, but Jaylen Tyson has just fared so well in that matchup. Cade has shot 5 of 18 when he is the primary defender. And then you look at the other top dog in the East, and we got to give props to the Knicks because they've been playing really well as of late. But again, we both see Cleveland and Boston as the 2 biggest threats in the Eastern Conference. And the combination of Jordan Walsh and Jaylen Brown and Derek White, those guys have collectively done a really good job on Cade too. I think he's shooting like 40% on 2-pointers in that matchup this year. And then you throw in Jayson Tatum as another option you can throw at him, switch onto him, and there's just a lot of, again, perimeter size, strength specifically, which is what you need against Cade. Length, athleticism, those big, strong, 6'6" kind of wing types, that's the toughest matchup for him. And unfortunately for him, a couple of the best teams in the conference are loaded with them. A team like San Antonio has a great option in Castle, but we also saw some other guys fare well against Cade on individual possessions. I just think as a scorer, he is not where he needs to be to carry this offense to the heights that they need. With the shitty spacing around him, the ability to force him into this very mid-range heavy shot diet because he is not a high-end rim finisher, because he is a below average, frankly, 3-point shooter this season. He's just not elite enough at those intermediate shots to live off of that. And you can't ignore that. Like you said, you go 4 of 16 against Cleveland. He's 7 of 23 deep into this game. Like, the scoring struggles that he can have in a bad matchup are very, very real. And this team just needs so much out of him, and they don't have other places to turn. Overall, against top 10 teams this year by point differential, Cade averages 24 points per game, 4 turnovers. His assists are down a little bit, on 53.6% true shooting. He shoots 45.5% on 2-pointers against other top 10 teams. Like, that just concerns me. That really does. The inefficiency that you've gotten out of him in some of these really high leverage matchups. And by the way, Detroit has found a way to win a decent number of these games because the defense is that good. But in terms of a deep playoff run, maybe the single most important indicator of can you win the title is, do you have an elite half-court offense? Obviously, there's so many things that matter, but if you don't have a very good half-court offense, it is essentially a disqualifier from your ability to actually win it all. And the Pistons are still 18th in half-court offense. Like, it would be unprecedented for a modern team to win the title like that. I went through and I pulled all of the last 15 champs, and you know where they ranked? 2nd, 1st, 7th. The Warriors were 12th in the regular season. That was with Steph missing about 20 games. And then they were a top 3 half-court offense in the playoffs. The Bucks were 6th. The Lakers actually were the lowest ranked half-court offense in 2020. They were 16th. So not that far ahead of the Pistons, but they jumped to top 3 in the playoffs as well. And dare I say, the equation is a little bit different here if you have Steph Curry or LeBron James in terms of what you can achieve in a playoff run than Cade Cunningham. I say that with no disrespect, but I think the difference there is obvious. And then everybody else, 8th, 1st, 4th, 3rd, 1st, 5th, like 18th, they would just be a total outlier. And I think we've seen this issue come to light in these recent games. And I think, like you said, that is the thing that's going to come back to get them. They just need high-end shooting. And Kevin Huerter, big miss on that front. Not that they took a big swing, but nevertheless, man, just pretty much been a useless player for them. And I don't see that guy who's going to step up. Like, you look at so many of these teams, And it's easy to see certain key role players swinging games offensively. I look at Cleveland, and there's so many guys. It's like, oh yeah, Jalen Tyson made 6 threes and had 3 key offensive rebounds and made a couple smart plays as a passer. Absolutely. I see that. Sam Merrill had a 7-3 game. Absolutely. I mean, and then you have the fact that guys like Allen and Mobley are your third and fourth options. Max Strus gets back in there and makes 6 threes and has 7 assists. Boom. That's easy to see. The Celtics, I mean, you go up and down, and it's like Sam Hauser had a big game. Absolutely. And again, like Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, these guys are your third and fourth options. Substantially better than the Pistons' second perimeter creator. It's just so much on Cade, and he's just not at that special level where I think it's going to translate when things get really fucking nasty and the defenses you're facing are elite. And obviously, like, the Pistons can do things to bring these games down into the mud because they're so physical and they're so athletic. But I think it's a better regular season formula than a playoff one. I really do.
Yeah, I just think they're going to have to take a hard, long look in the mirror this offseason. And they've come a far way. I mean, from
the least.
From where Detroit's been, like, they were offensively inept and their defense is horrible. Now the defense is elite, and the next step for them is to iron out some of these half-court issues. I mean, I still like Asar and Holland as, like, building blocks for this team, and I like their upside in the long term and how they fit. But I wonder, I mean, I think they are going to have to cash in some of these chips and sacrifice some of their defensive identity. Again, if it's a Paul Reed or an Isaiah Stewart, and I love these guys as culture setters, but like I think they're going to have to part ways with some of those guys to get it back offensively. There's just a big imbalance, and it's like you said, it's a great regular season formula, but for the playoffs, I think it's going to get exploited.
I think Holland is a pretty clear odd man out here, and I never liked the pick. Not so much because of the talent, but because of the fit. Because I was like, how are you going to get the most out of Asar Thompson and Ron Holland on the same basketball team with like the major spacing concerns that they can both present? And I think Holland obviously is the inferior of the two talents, right? Asar is just an even more supreme athlete and is able to find more ways to be effective offensively in the half court and is a better passer and an even better defender. But like Holland is a very good defender. He plays his ass off out there. He's a dog. Like he's the perfect 2026 Piston. But there comes a point where when your offense is 9 points worse with a guy on the floor because he can't knock down an outside shot for the life of him, like, you're going to have to address that. So I think obviously every Pistons fan should be extremely optimistic. Are you kidding me? Cade is in MVP conversations. Jalen Duren is an all-star. They tripled their win total last year, and then they got way better this year. Like, there's no question. It is a smashing success of a season, and nobody is saying anything definitive about where the Pistons can go from here, what their ceiling is down the line if they do address these needs on their roster. My thing is just there have been a lot of people who have presented them as the best team in the East, which their record is, or a team that really, really is a top contender to win the title, and I'm just not there with them. I think they've gotten so much better so fast, but there are still issues that I look at with this team, and I'm like, I don't believe that is going to hold up over 4 playoff series. Like, somebody is going to exploit the lack of offensive skill around Cade. Somebody is going to force Cade into a tough offensive series, and ultimately there's just too many offensive liabilities around him. So we're saying a lot of the same stuff we've been saying about Detroit. At least I know I've been saying for a long time. You've been higher on Detroit than I have. And by the way, rightly so, because they've been better than I expected. Just in terms of these like real high-end conversations, I do feel the same way about them that I have consistently felt. I do want to give props to the Spurs, though, because I think not only are they a really tough matchup for Detroit, they're just a tough matchup for damn near the entire NBA. Like, how they can impose themselves athletically. You talk about Detroit having this massive point in the paint differential. I think in the month of February, it was the highest any team has had in a single month in the play-by-play era. They were outscoring their opponents by like 19 points in the paint. It just doesn't exist against the Spurs with what Wemby does to take away the paint. And by the way, like, if you are going up against a rim protector the level of Wemby, like, we didn't even see the Spurs really get in the bag of tricks of what they can do there. Like, they weren't using Wemby as a roamer. And maybe you could argue when Duren's on the floor, you can't because he's going to bully anybody who's not Wemby physically. That's possible. But you also have to see the possibility of putting Wemby on a guy like Asar Thompson and just having him roam off and be constantly there as a paint presence. That could be destructive, and the Cavs can do a version of that, right? Several of these teams that have really, really good rim protectors could at least try it. But regardless, he's so impactful in the paint defensively. And then offensively, obviously, Wemby's bringing you that paint scoring value, but the Spurs guards, they're just so fast. Even the Pistons couldn't contain them. That's one of the best perimeter defenses in basketball, and it just felt like Fox and Harper and Castle, he only has 11 points in this game, but 12 assists. Like, I thought he had a really pronounced impact on this game because he was great defensively on Cade and then was just creating so much penetration offensively. When this team gets high-level shot making from their best offensive players, they are as good as anybody. That's going to be the swing factor for this team. How does Wemby deal with like advanced playoff coverages, which I thought the Pistons did not throw at him? I thought the Pistons dealt with him in single coverage way too much. Like, 0 turnovers from Wemby. I just wanted to see them be more aggressive. And he had a great shot-making game, and they also just couldn't stop fouling him. They kept putting their hands on him, and he'd go into an upward shooting motion and get a call. But I think you just need to throw more bodies at him and swarm him more. But when he's making his mid-post turnarounds and he's making his threes and Fox is making his pull-up jumpers and his pull-up threes, like, the offense needs that to reach real high levels, and it's not the most consistent, but when they get it with what this team does defensively and athletically and in transition, they're a dominant force, and we've seen that this year. I mean, the Spurs are sitting here with third best record in the NBA. I think they're only a half game back of the Pistons for the second best record. I think they're the more impressive team. I think they're actually the more lethal playoff threat because I think their defense is even better, and I think their offense is better too, and I think they have more high-end weapons, and they have more shooting. So, yes, this definitely exposed some of the concerns about Detroit, but it's also so impressive from a San Antonio team that has been pretty much nothing but consistently so impressive.
Yeah, I mean, my take is I think the Spurs could win the title as soon as next season. I just think they're there. Again, I think a lot's going to have to come together for them to win the title. Like you said, the shooting, the Fox's over-the-top shooting. Wemby's going to have to deal with playoff defense as well, though. But they're so talented, and they're so fucking athletic, man. Even a guy that, like, doesn't get a ton of burn for them, Carter Bryant, is out there making plays last night, and he's going to continue to get even better next season. Like, that combination of Harper and Castle, man, I just keep moving towards, I think they should just keep everybody and let them rock out and just have a dangerous trio of insanely athletic guards that you can't stay in front of any of them. Harper is awesome. I love Dylan Harper. He's such a good decision maker. He's so good at scoring around the rim. I think he's still going to be a future superstar. It's just weird seeing a team this year. Vassell, man, Vassell is such an awesome scorer at every single level. I just think it's going to come together, and I think the Spurs are probably going to be my title favorite coming into next season. I'm going to lean on OKC this year. I think San Antonio is going to be a really tough out in the playoffs this season, could potentially go on a Western Conference Finals run. I wouldn't rule that out for San Antonio, but I think San Antonio is going to probably be my favorite next season, man. They are so talented. They're so young. Wemby is such a freak. Their depth is awesome. I love everything about the Spurs, man. They play awesome ball.
We'll see. They're obviously the top contender, big picture, to OKC, and I think the Spurs can absolutely win the title this year. Like, why can't they? We can have some of these offensive concerns, but they have the best formula to beat OKC. If you beat OKC,
I think
the biggest challenge.
I think the concerns will get. I mean, their bad games are bad. Like when Fox has.
I don't think they're going to win the title, but if we're gonna say that some of these other teams outside of OKC can win it, I don't know why San Antonio wouldn't be included in the group of teams that like legitimately can.
I mean, I've been saying San Antonio was
Denver.
I've been saying San Antonio was a championship contender from the first month of the season. I'm just saying.
I know, but you just said they can win the title as soon as next year. I think they can win the title this year. I'm not going to pick it, but it's a possibility.
I would be shocked if they won the title this season. I think they're a contender. I'm just saying that they're going to be among the top 2 to 3 teams for me next season. I can confidently say that with internal development, with retaining guys. I just think it would take. The shooting still worries me. The spacing concerns. I think that Wemby is probably going to have a little bit of a rough showing in his first playoff run. I don't think Fox's pull-up shooting is going to be what it needs to be to get them through a playoff run. But I think with, again, development from the young guys, I think the Spurs are going to be there next season. Not that they can't. It would really surprise me if the Spurs were able to be that consistent enough offensively to win the title. When they win defensively, they can beat anybody because they're so dominant in transition. Honestly, it's not as drastic as Detroit. My concern with San Antonio would also be their half-court offense.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think that we are aligned on all that stuff. I just think their defense is such a superpower that it's possible. Again, if you can get through the OKC matchup, and all this stuff is relative to matchup, right? Like, just because they are the best team maybe to beat OKC doesn't mean they're the second best team in the NBA. But I also can't say for sure that they're not the second best team in the NBA. And I have questions about everybody. Like, I think outside of OKC, the two teams that look the most complete right now in the NBA are Boston and Cleveland. To me, they're the two teams out east. But in terms of the West, I think you should be as concerned about Denver's defense as you are about San Antonio's offense. San Antonio's sixth in offensive rating. So, again, I'm not pushing back like in a big way, but I do think there is a world where the Spurs win it this year. Is it a likely world? No. I agree with the same concerns that you have, but you see what they do to an elite team like Detroit, and they just blow them off the court, and we've seen them execute the formula where they can give more problems to the OKC offense, far more problems than anybody else. Like, they can cause really good offenses to have really bad days. And so if their offense is clicking in their own right, which I think, again, it's much more bankable than Detroit's, they're a much better half-court offense and just a better offense overall, they can beat anybody. So shout out to the Spurs. They're really impressive. When they are shooting well, they're the second best team in the NBA. The question is, how consistent is that? And I'm not super convinced on that front, but very impressive win from them. I want to talk about something else, Logan, that has just been on my mind. I was thinking the other day as I was watching Ty Jerome, who has come back this season for the Grizzlies and has just been lighting people up. This guy got signed this offseason for 3 years, $27 million. And it got me thinking about the best contracts in the NBA and the worst contracts in the NBA. So I just want to discuss that with you, my friend. What do you think is the best contract in the NBA right now? We'll start there, and then we'll get to the worst. What stands out most to you there?
The best contract in the league to me, I singled out two guys. Peyton Pritchard and A.J. Mitchell would probably be my picks, just because those guys are getting paid pennies on the dollar, and they're elite offensive guards. Peyton, I mean, is just unbelievable, and AJ's so good at getting downhill. AJ Mitchell's getting $3 million this year. Like, you know, there are guys on rookie contracts on his own team that are making more money, and I think he's one of the, you know, 6 most valuable players on this roster. Like, he's been awesome, especially with J-Dub being out this season too. And then Pritchard, I'm not surprised that he signed this, but like the fact that this guy's making $7 million a year, like 4 years, $30 million isn't anything to shake a stick at, but Pritchard, I think, delivers thrice that value, maybe quadruple that value on a nightly basis. Like, he's severely underpaid. I think Pritchard and Mitchell are like more like, you know, $15 to $25 million a year kind of guys, and they're getting them at a fraction of that price. So those are the first two guys that came to mind for me.
Yeah, I completely agree with both those guys, and I would loop Ty Jerome into this same group. I think in terms of literal, like, value per dollar, what you're getting with AJ is the best, but also the circumstances are a little different where, like, AJ, when extended, was totally unproven. He was just coming off of last year when he was like in the rotation, but then wasn't a part of their playoff run, and he's a second-round pick, so it makes sense that he got extended for so cheap, although it is still a ridiculously team-friendly deal. Pritchard is kind of like the middle ground, where he signs it after the 2024 season, at which point he was like clearly a good offensive bench player, but hadn't had his 6th man of the year season, hadn't done obviously what he's done this season, and so you see how he ended up in that like lower end range of 4 years, $30 million. And then Ty Jerome is probably the craziest contract to me, just because we saw this guy last year be a flat out elite offensive player, and he still went for $9 million a year. I get it that there was an ugly playoff series factoring in there, but I do think the through line with all these guys, I mean, they're all in the same archetype, Logan. Peyton Pritchard has started a fair bit this year, but fundamentally, these are elite bench creators, and these are the most underpaid players in the NBA. And it's very interesting to me that this trend has emerged as, at the same time, we're talking about throughout this entire season the dynamic of the NBA getting lower on the very gifted offensively, but flawed small guards who struggle to defend as building blocks. But some of those guys are still getting paid, whatever, $40-50 million. And then you've got these guys who, if you drop Ty Jerome and Austin Reeves' situation, could he not produce the same offensive numbers? Like, I truly believe that he could. Ty Jerome is averaging per 75 possessions this year, and that's only over 9 games, but 31 points and 9 assists on 65% true shooting. Like, he is an elite pick and roll player. He makes 60% of his floaters going back to last year. He makes over 40% of his threes going back to last year. Like, he and Austin Reeves honestly have a lot of the same great strengths as like elite pick and roll players versus kind of default schemes. Like, it's going to work at a really high level over the course of an 82 game season. You get them in a more physical playoff environment against a super athletic switching defense. And I have my concerns, as we saw with both of them in the playoffs last year, but Ty Jerome goes for $9 million. Austin Reeves is probably about to go for north of $40 million a year, like presuming the Lakers max him out. I just think that chasm, it makes it even harder to justify paying a guy like Reeves that sort of money. Like, this archetype that already the NBA has been getting lower, we've been getting lower on, and now you have these dudes who are like such insane bargain contracts but are so damn good who could deliver a majority of the same value at literally, these 3 guys combined make half of what Austin Reeves is probably going to make per year on his next contract. I just think that's very interesting. It feels like the league has gotten lower on these offensively slanted guards, and they sort of translated that all the way down to the bench. And by the way, AJ Mitchell is not offensively slanted. He's a legitimately good defensive guard too, which is why his contract's just unfathomable. But I think that archetype has really become undervalued, and I think that's what these guys show you. Like, sure, there are explanations for why they're all underpaid, Mitchell and Pritchard not being as proven, but it's no coincidence that there are 3 guys you look at and you're like, those are 3 of the more offensively talented players in the NBA, and they're all getting pennies for the value that they're actually contributing.
Yeah, I do think the league is getting lower on that archetype. Reeves, we'll have to see if he gets paid, man. I don't know. Like, we would assume that that's what he's going to go for, but, you know, I didn't think Ty Jerome was going to get signed for as cheap as he did in the offseason, too. And obviously, a lot of that was predicated on Ty Jerome having a shitty playoff series, but you can also apply that to Reeves. I think anybody who pays Reeves that amount of money is a chump. They're a sucker. You give him 30 M's plus, I think that's a bad deal.
But the difference is, like, just the raw opportunity that Reeves has been given. You can look at their production on a per minute, per possession basis, and you can say, yeah, Ty Jerome has been producing like a star. And I think there's reason to believe if you gave him the full offensive opportunity of a star, he would continue to do that. But it's still different when, even if it's only because you're playing fewer minutes, you're scoring 13 points per game versus Austin Reeves scoring 25 points per game. I'm not saying it's different in terms of the talent. I'm saying it's different in terms of the perception. It's different in terms of how that drives up the market, what a team feels pressure to do. I just think with how the Lakers operate, with how NBA teams usually operate, Austin Reeves is going to get paid a boatload of money this year. And, like, I think there's a price for Austin Reeves. I think $30 million is a good price for him. I think he's a really good offensive player. But I think it's probably going to be more than that he's going to get. And in contrast to these guys, like, that's just tough. It's tough to feel like you aren't really, really losing the value battle there.
Yeah, I think that's an overpay. I would give Reeves, like, 20 to 25.
It's not going to happen. Like, there's just no world in which that happens. And by the way,
then I wouldn't pay him.
I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm saying that's not how things work. And there's just an inefficiency here that I think is very interesting, where we somehow have players who are very close in actual value, polarized in terms of contract value.
I also wanted to be clear about something, too. I don't know about you, but I did omit people who are on, like, rookie contracts, because then I think, like, obviously Wemby would be, like, the obvious choice here for people who are maybe screaming at their TV or computer or phone right now. Like, obviously Wemby at $13 million is easy. Case and Wallace on his rookie deal, but, like, you know, those are non-negotiable. So I only wanted to include deals that had been negotiated.
Yeah, there's another archetype that I do think a couple guys stand out with here as well, and it's another archetype that I think has been devalued by the NBA. Some of these, like, lower end but legitimately solid starting bigs who the NBA decided, like, the better part of a decade ago, pretty much replaceable, right? If you can protect the rim at a decently high level and you're a solid rim running big.
Am I about to get a Carson Nemias-Queta take?
He's on the list, Logan. Keita is on the list. I mean, 3 years, $7.2 million. Moussa Diabate is another guy who came to mind. 3 years, $5.7 million. And another component here is both these guys obviously just hadn't been in high-profile roles before they signed these contracts. And just in terms of their pedigree as players, Diabate was a mid-second round pick, and Keita was a mid-second round pick as well. So you understand those components. But I do think, again, there was this notion of, oh yeah, that position is just fully replaceable. And it's not true. And you could argue, I guess, well, these guys are in part evidence that it is replaceable, that you can find guys sort of off the scrap heap, depth bigs who can step up like this. But I also think there are things that they both do that are standouts in terms of their value. Keita is legitimately quite a good rim protector. He is legitimately quite a good offensive rebounder. He has decent enough offensive feel where you can run handoffs through him and stuff. And then Diabate is just super high motor, elite offensive rebounder, grown into a legitimately nice short roll passer. He can read the court. He can make decisions as a passer in those contexts. And somebody who also is a pretty skilled finisher off the roll. And both dudes who have really positively contributed to two of the most overachieving teams of the season. In fact, I just made YouTube videos about both these teams, but the Celtics and Hornets have maybe overachieved preseason expectations more than anybody, and having players who can bring value like this on such cheap contracts is a component of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I go back and forth with this in my head, but I actually think it might be the most underrated archetype in basketball, man. I really appreciate guys like that. That's why I always liked Keita before he went to Boston. The center is just so important to. If you're a good rebounder, man, I'm gonna like you at the 5 spot. I just think that's your biggest responsibility as a center on any team, is to anchor the glass and to protect the rim. And if you can do that on a bargain bin contract like this, and that's what made me so mad, dude. To shit on the Kings again. Dude, Keita was tearing up the G League for 2 to 3 years, and they never gave him any burn at all in the rotation. And I get some bonuses there. But it's dude, you're giving Rashawn Holmes minutes and stuff like that, bro. They never even gave Keita a look, and then the Celtics bring him in, and he's just a great rotation piece for them. Not related with this at all, man. I really wonder about how many G League guys, if they got actual burn, would show out and would actually prove that. I think basketball is so talent rich nowadays and so deep, man. And I just wonder about guys that never get that opportunity or look that would blossom if they did. And Keita's one of those guys to me, man. That he's a rotation guy in this league, and I think he's probably worth 4 to 5 times what he's getting paid.
Right. And that's what's so interesting about this archetype is because there's not a lot of skills that really flash with these guys, a lot of the value is really decided on the margins. The difference between, and not to call these guys out, but a Nick Richards or a Jericho Sims, whatever, guys who athletically, physically look the part, probably even more so than these two guys. Definitely I would say so. The difference is the couple of things that guys like Keita and Diabate can do that add value on the margins. And those aren't things that are necessarily going to show up until these guys are playing and until they're playing in a serious context. And so it's not super easy to judge in the G League. These are not guys who are going to stand out in a G League game whatsoever. These are guys who, for a shitty team, their value might go underappreciated. And the difference between, again, a guy who you pay $5 million and you're damn, we basically wasted that. And a guy who you pay $5 million and you're oh my God, what a steal. It really can be those subtle things. So I guess that's the most interesting part about the devaluing of this archetype. It's not that people are wrong necessarily about this sort of center position if you don't have some sort of real high-end value being relatively replaceable, but it really does matter still who you pick, who you choose to pay, because there is still a difference between low-end starter and low-end bench player, a guy who's not really in the rotation. And so shout out to those two archetypes. I just thought it was interesting that there was a theme when I looked at it. I was like, there are a couple of kinds of players who are being underpaid. And yeah, maybe all these guys, except for Ty Jerome, have overachieved after signing the contract, but I think it's interesting nonetheless. Okay, how about the other side of this, Logan? The worst contracts in the NBA. Who you got?
I did say earlier in the year that I thought LeBron was on this short list, and I still do think that's true, but he's not one of the first guys that I think
It's over
of
after this year. You're not tied to him long term, which I think makes it easier to stomach.
And yeah, I want to rule out some of these other guys, like due to injuries. Like I think Embiid and Anthony Davis are low-hanging fruit just because they're routinely unavailable. Before I get to the big fish, I do think there's another archetype of player. The just unplayable guys that are making over $10 million a year, I think, are all worthy shouts. Shout out Zeke Naji, Jared Vanderbilt, Jonathan Isaac, Lonzo
Zeke Naji
Ball.
has improved this year. Zeke
Naji still fucking sucks.
Well,
I do not care.
This year. He does suck.
I think
All
he's
right,
still trash.
That's
all
valid.
those guys, all those unplayable players, I think are honorable mentions. But, it's still for all of those guys like 10 to 15, 18 million, like in that ballpark. The big fish to me, Paul George, I think, has to be on this list because he's making $51 million. Zach LaVine is another good one. Terry Rozier, he doesn't have a long contract, but he's getting paid $26 million. The guy who takes the cake, there is a guy who sticks out like a sore thumb, and we've bagged on him in these conversations. I think unequivocally it's Jalen Green, and I don't think it's close, man. I mean, oh my goodness. I couldn't believe the specs of his contract, and it just made me think to a couple of years ago, like when those rookies are all off of their rookie deals, and it's that time of the year when everybody's getting that big, fat rookie extension, and Jalen Green was just in those pocket of guys who got it. Wow, man. $36 million for 3 years to a guy who brings nothing to the table at all. Can you name one good thing that Jalen Green does on the basketball court?
Or a farm. Handsome.
Yeah. It just blew my mind. It still boggles my mind how that guy is making so much money and is bringing absolutely zero value to your team. He is a negative on the basketball court. Like, I actually view some of these guys like, maybe you could, like, don't get me wrong, a lot of them are unmovable. Paul George, nobody's trading for him. John Morant, I really highly doubt that anybody's trading for him, right? I didn't even mention him earlier. But, some of these guys, like, Jalen Green is actually unmovable. I don't know a single he has a toxic contract. He is a toxic asset. I don't know a single team that would you could package maybe 2 first-round picks along with him. And I don't know if a team would be like, it's worth it. With all the
big return for Kevin Durant. He was the big return for Kevin Durant. That's why the Suns
which is
won
crazy.
They got
man.
a future superstar. They got a future superstar, Logan.
And the Suns are just way better without him. With all the restraints of the cap nowadays, I don't know. I just think it is far and away the worst contract in basketball.
It's a very fair take. The people who are still holding out hope for Jalen Green are literally the Japanese soldiers hiding in the caves like 40 years after World War II. Like, you are fighting a battle that has long been lost, my friends. He is so bad. He's averaging 13 points per game on 44% true shooting right now. Man, that's 14 games in, but holy shit. Holy shot chucker. Holy brick. Holy negative basketball player. That contract is terrible. I think if we want to have a shit off, Paul George, 3 years, $160 million versus Jalen Green's 3 years, $106 million. Like, that is obscene from PG3. That might be worse, but he does at least bring positive value when he's on the court, just at least with his shooting and defense and solid playmaking feel. That being said, he's pretty rarely on the court. And so at least I don't have to worry about that with Jalen Green like I do. Paul George has played 68 games in the last 2 years. And when he plays those games, again, he's like a solid 15-point-per-game scorer for you. He's like a good plus role-playing wing, basically. I think those are the two. And then there's a whole category of overpays for stars who can't stay healthy or are in decline. Like, Joel Embiid has been so good this year, but at the same time is a completely immovable contract because of the health. AD, health and decline coming together there. Ja Morant, health and decline, and just not being a guy I would want to build around whatsoever, just a deeply flawed basketball player who was trending downwards. Those are the ones that stood out to me. And you mentioned, like, some of those bad role player contracts, or I should say aspiring role player, like the guys who can't get on the floor that you mentioned, the Vanderbilts of the world, the Zeke Najis, or you do have some egregious overpays like a Patrick Williams. That's a really bad contract. But there's really no way to fuck up a contract as badly as when you totally overpay for a guy who you think is a star and is not able to come close to delivering star value.
I'm just like thinking about having a referendum on guys who haven't developed or haven't seized their potential yet, or, you know, guys at the end of the rookie contract, and if you really haven't proven it in a winning context, like, you might just be better off letting them walk, because that's why Jalen Green got paid, right? It was speculation. It was what we think he can become, and he has just never realized it. He's never put it together, and he just doesn't get it, man. It's sad when you see a guy like that is athletically gifted but does not know how to play basketball.
Yeah, it's tricky. Like, obviously, you have to make some projection often when you're giving out that second contract, but I think you want to see progress. And I think you want to, like, know that there is some floor of impact there where you can extend a guy like Jaden McDaniels, and maybe some people are like, ooh, that seems like a big number. But regardless, you don't know exactly what Jaden McDaniels is going to grow into, but you know that he's going to positively impact the basketball game. So you're never just going to be like, oh, my God, we're eating this contract. Whereas with a guy like Jalen Green, there's a world where you're eating the contract. I just think across the board,
I mean,
right? Like, Paul George is the flip side of that, of a guy who obviously had proven his star value for years, but then you have the question of age and decline, which, by the way, I liked the Paul George move at the time.
Yeah.
Like, I would have been horribly wrong about that. So I just think overall on every level, it comes down to being more cautious with how you spend on stars. And if there were a philosophy that I were to apply, it would be more willingness to let flawed stars about whom I have significant concerns, walk, and prioritizing instead those contracts on the margins, value wherever you think you can find it, targeting some of these undervalued archetypes. Like, I know we've talked about this stuff a lot this year, but every time we talk about it, like, it just seems to be proven more true.
It's just crazy to me. Jalen Green got paid this contract after a 22-win season where he averaged 20 points per game on
54% true shooting.
Under 42% from the field. Yeah, man. Like,
Draft
I don't
bias,
know.
Man.
I just don't get it.
Draft bias, scoring volume bias. They were all very much working in the favor of Jalen Green for a while, but he just sucks. There's just no two ways about it. So I'm sorry about that, Suns fans. Speaking of contracts, offseason moves, things of that nature, let's get to the NFL here, because stuff's going down in this offseason right now. And most notably, the Buffalo Bills, Logan, made a move for one DJ Moore. They traded a second rounder for DJ Moore and a fifth rounder in return. Is this move going to move the needle for the Buffalo Bills? Do you like this from their perspective?
Yeah, I like it. It may be a bit of an overpay in terms of what we've seen other receivers go for. This is from the same organization that brought you Keon Coleman. It's great that I'm your head coach now. Clearly, they have confidence in their receiving staff. I think this is the biggest need
Second
for the Bills.
highest paid receiving room in the NFL, by the way.
The Bills?
Yep.
Does that include tight ends?
No, that's wide receivers.
Ooh, right now?
Well, yeah.
Who are they paying?
Shelling out money to, like, Curtis Samuel and Josh Palmer and dudes who can't even get on the field.
Who is number one?
I don't remember. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Can we take a time? The Bills are number two?
Yeah, hold on. Let me see if I can pull up the highest.
That value has certainly not been returned upon.
No, it is not. The only higher paid receiving room in the entire NFL, Logan, the Cincinnati Bengals. Dare I say justified. Next, the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh,
dare I say
boy.
justified. And then you've got the frickin' Buffalo Bills, baby.
Yeah,
Hell
well, the only reason I suggest slight overpay is not really the compensation, but more the opportunity cost of other receivers that we have seen get traded, most notably being one of the guys that you just brought up in George Pickens. Like, there's a different level of talent in a guy like that. And I think DJ Moore is excellent, and I think he was kind of buried. Not buried, but the Bears receiving room is so talented with guys like Loveland and Odunze. There's just Moore did seem like an odd man out considering that he was on that contract. That being said, I still looked at wide receiver as one of the biggest needs for this team. Clearly, ESPN reported this stat, but in 2020, the Bills were number one in percentage of targets to receivers. From 2020 to 2022, they were top 3 every single year. From 2023 to 2025, they've been bottom half of the league, and they were bottom 10 last year in receiver target share. And what that speaks to is just a lack of faith in your receiving room. A little bit of interrelated with that is just offensive philosophy, I think, as well. And the Bills have a really good tight end in Dalton Kincaid. That throws noise into that number a little bit, but it does speak to a lack of faith in turning to your receivers and a lack of separation created in routes run. Like,
yeah,
this was clearly a big need. I'm glad that the Bills took the pulse of the room and realized, hey, we need to do something. We need to get better. And I'm just glad they didn't sit on their hands and stand pat and go, oh, yeah, we're going to figure it out with the same guys that we've been running it back with. We knew that they lost something in Diggs. Brandon Cooks was clearly not the answer. Like,
yeah.
I'm just glad that the Bills did something. And they do also get a 5th-round pick in return back, too, right? It's not just a second round, them giving it up. That does mean a little bit something for Buffalo. So, by and large, I do like the move. This is clearly a need. DJ Moore is a very talented receiver. He's going to step in and be number 1 or number 2 in terms of the go-to guy between him and Kincaid. Like, I really like this move for Buffalo. It's clearly their biggest need. They needed to do something, and I like it. I'm just more excited about the Buffalo Bills offense heading into next season.
I like it too. And like you said, getting back a 5th makes this basically equivalent to 3rd-round compensation, giving up a 2nd but getting back a 5th. Nevertheless, it is an overpay when you consider the draft compensation plus the contract. The contract is really the problem here, where this guy's making like $24 million a year. And even though there's some ways for the Bills to convert the cap, so it's a much smaller hit this year.
Mm-hmm. You guys are only going to take on 16 mil of that, but it is still a big contract.
And I think it can be converted to an even smaller amount this season, I've seen. But regardless, I think they also fully guaranteed a lot of that money down the line. So, like, they're going to be paying a substantial amount to DJ Moore. And that's where I wonder, could you have gotten him for less draft compensation? Because the Bears clearly wanted to get off that contract. The Bears had no reason for DJ Moore, just with Rome and Luther
think they're trying
Loveland and all the talent they have in that pass catcher room.
It's a good point, and I wonder if Buffalo should have used that leverage to their advantage a little more, because I think the Bears were willing to, one, get rid of him because of what you're saying for an abundance at the position, but they also have a new need to allocate that money in their center spot after their starting center retired. So
yeah,
I agree
definitely
with you. I think the Bills could have used that to their advantage a little bit better.
Like, the value per dollar per asset with DJ Moore, the Bears are winning this deal for sure in that regard. And by the way, the Bears just win in this deal no matter what, because they get assets back, they get off the money for a player they really didn't need. But from the Bills' perspective, I do think they needed to take a big swing at a key position. Now, I don't think receiver is the biggest need on this roster. I think edge is the biggest need on this roster. I think edge has been the biggest need on this roster. Like, I don't disagree philosophically with Brandon Beane at all when he goes on a rant a year ago about how our job is not to put up fantasy numbers for receivers. Our job is to score points on offense. And when you're building an offense around a quarterback like Josh Allen, you can't have an elite offensive line, which the Bills do have, and really good running back play, which the Bills do have, and good tight ends, which the Bills do have, and also have really good wide receivers. Like, I think deprioritizing receiver is fine. The Bills have been back-to-back years without a number 1 receiver since Diggs left, a top 2 offense in terms of points per drive. So, like, again, I think you understand the offense has been elite in spite of a lack of high-end receiver play, but you can also acknowledge when the offense has struggled, it was usually because of a lack of receiver talent. And you can also acknowledge, okay, we can deprioritize wide receiver as a position, but that doesn't mean it's cool for us to just miss every time. Miss on Curtis Samuel, miss on Josh Palmer, get to the place where we're calling up Gabe Davis and Brandon Cooks and all these guys at the end of the season. Like, it has been a ridiculous, frankly, situation at receiver for the Bills. So I do like them taking a swing here. If I could have had my pick, obviously I would have rather them get like Max Crosby, who is apparently available, who is at the bigger position of need because the Bills have struggled very much defensively in the playoffs. They've been great offensively. They've struggled defensively, and they've specifically really, really struggled to get pressure. I just don't think they were getting Max Crosby. And maybe I should be more optimistic, but I don't know. It just feels like whenever these players have emerged, any of these high-end edges, Micah, Myles Garrett conversations, like it's never been the Bills who have actually been able to make it happen. So that's where I come down on liking it overall. Is there an opportunity cost there? Theoretically. Is it a realistic opportunity cost? I don't know. And you can bicker about the particulars of the deal here, it being an overpay on paper. But if it's the difference between a Super Bowl and no Super Bowl, no one's going to care. That's what it comes down to. And I understand you can argue that's sort of a results over process mindset here, right? Oh, the Rams go out there and they win a Super Bowl, so you don't care that they gave up their first round picks. If they didn't, it would be a disaster. And I understand that perspective, but I just think there's a realistic possibility that this is the difference between a Super Bowl and no Super Bowl, right? When you have such an elite offense and you only have one need and you address it, it makes you pretty much impervious to matchup in a way that the Bills, as great as their offense was, weren't, because they could have those receiver struggles in certain matchups. And DJ Moore is a very talented player. I understand his production dipped last year. I think that's more so because he didn't really have synergy with Caleb. And again, there was just so much young talent in that group of pass catchers around him. He is a weapon after the catch. He is certainly more of a deep threat than the Bills have had in years, and that's specifically the dimension that is lacking here. Just guys who can take the top off the defense. My God, that's why Brandon Cooks, even being Brandon Cooks at this age, like, you at least felt his impact in the offense because he could actually get open deep when nobody else could for 2 years. Like, this is a guy who's been extremely productive, who's averaged almost 1,100 yards per season in his career. That's huge. That is huge for a Bills offense, who last year, Shakir was the leading receiver with like 700 yards. I mean, it's been the ultimate just distribute to whoever's open, throw the tight ends a lot, like you said, more and more screens, just more and more a sort of ball control, more conservative style. And I'm just excited to see a dynamic wide receiver talent playing with Josh Allen again. And I do think this should be the best offense they've had because now they have all these other components too. And the concern here, I guess, is like, I think this is a swing worth taking for a proven high-end talent, even if the cost is high. And I think that because the half measures have gone nowhere for the Bills. That applies to both receiver and edge, right? These sort of like budget halfway options they've tried to take, they just haven't worked. They just haven't made any difference. That being said, even though I think the Bills are right to take a full swing, when they have taken full swings previously, they also have not worked out. Amari Cooper, I thought was going to work. That was a disaster. Amari Cooper was out of the league after the Bills traded for him. Von Miller on the other side of the ball, disaster contract. So maybe Brandon Beane is just bad. Maybe he's getting hosed here again. Like, I don't think so. I think DJ Moore is still a very good player, and I think he's got several prime years left in front of him, but I don't trust the guy making the decisions here for the Bills. That being said, my criticism of him has been not being aggressive enough in terms of addressing these key positions, and I think he's done what he can to do that in this offseason here. So I do like it overall. I can see a world where it doesn't work out for sure, but I do think no matter what, it's going to make the Bills' offense better. And if the Bills gets to a point where they're scoring 33 points per game, like, there may be no stopping them, even if the defense is still lackluster, which is always my big concern with this team.
Yeah, and I mean, Josh and James Cook and this offensive line, it's going to balance out over a 17-game season, right? You're always going to have an elite offense when you've got all those pieces in place. But in individual games, you can throw a lot of that stuff out the window. Can the guy win one-on-one? Can he go downfield and beat a guy for a big play? Like,
can he hold on to a 50-50 ball that he has possession of that decides your season? Like,
yeah,
stuff makes a difference on the margins, absolutely.
In individual games, you can throw a lot of the schematic and all the stuff that balances out over the course of a season. You can throw that out of the window, and that's where I really think DJ is going to make a difference. Because like you're saying, you can bitch and moan about the capital and the asset allocation right now. If DJ Moore goes out there and balls out in the big playoff game and is the difference maker,
right,
shut your trap. Like, it was the right call.
Superstars swing big games, and I'm not saying DJ Moore is a superstar, but he's a star. The Bills haven't had a wide receiver who could take over a game since Diggs. And
Exactly.
that could easily matter in a really big game. I love Khalil Shakir. He's very good. But again, that takeover dimension, they just haven't had anybody who can do that. And that's where I'm really excited about DJ Moore. So I am optimistic about this overall. For the Bears, I think it's just objectively nicely done for all the reasons that we already discussed. Another big trade in the AFC, Logan. Another star player moved. The Chiefs earlier this week moved off of Trent McDuffie. And in return from the Rams, they got the 29th pick in this year's draft, a 5th, a 6th, and a 3rd next year. How do you like this from the Rams' perspective? Let's start there.
I like this for both sides, but for LA, I mean, corner was clearly the number one need for this team. And, I mean, we talked about it a lot. You saw it in the game against Seattle. And it's crazy because it's not like the Rams aren't super talented there. They have a lot of guys that I like. If it's Curl, if it's Quentin Lake, like the Rams have good corners, but they didn't have the kind of number one guy that I think McDuffie is. And the reason specifically why I like this move for the Rams, a few things. One, I think this signifies to all of us, which, shocker, the Rams are trying to win the Super Bowl next season. This has been a team that over the past 6 to 7 years has shown us they do not care about first-round draft capital. They will sacrifice it if they can go out and get a known commodity. And more often than not, when the Rams make a move like this, it's paid off. And it's been the right decision to make, even though it's going against the traditional grain, because the benefit of this is if you draft a guy late in the first round that you believe in and it pays off and is a starter on your football team, you have got him for 4 to 5 years on a rookie contract. That is invaluable in the NFL. But the Rams have shown us that if you've got a guy that you really believe in at a position of need and it pays off, who cares about them picks? That's been the Rams' philosophy, and I think it's the right one when you have, one, such a significant need, two, when you can line McDuffie up all over the field. That's something that I really like about McDuffie. Is he's not just an outside corner, an inside guy. You can line him up in the slot. You can line up on the number one receiver. Like, McDuffie is going to thrive wherever you put him on the field. But also, because they have already crushed so many of their draft picks over the past few years, this is one of the lowest paid defenses in football. And so you look at these draft picks and you go, you don't need to hit a home run with this first-round pick in the 5th and the 6th that they gave up or the 3rd that they got last year. They have already drafted and put these guys in place on rookie deals to where you can allow yourself to make a move like this without sacrificing or needing all of these other picks. So it's a huge position of need for them. If we're just looking at it as an asset, I do think it's a little bit of an overpay, but it's such a big position of need and the position of need to me for the Rams that I would be willing up to give the amount of assets that they gave up. And this is a championship contender, like I said, that has everything else in place across the board. Why not? I really like this move for the Rams. I think it, with some of the, and I'm hesitant to say this because, again, we need to see the draft and the rest of free agency play out. With some of the losses that we are seeing Seattle suffer in free agency and in the offseason, this could potentially make the Rams the top dog in the NFC coming into the season next year.
Feels like they should be on paper. I don't want to downplay Seattle and how great they are, but I think the margin this season was razor thin. Looks like the Rams are getting better, and we'll see what Seattle does. We can't say until this offseason is all concluded, but I do like this for them. And we're going to see how they approach the rest of their offseason in terms of the secondary, because Kobe Durant is a free agent, Cam Curl is a free agent, but regardless, this was going to be a big need for them, secondary, specifically corner, and they address it with an elite player. Like, I do have this philosophy. It's ironic, we've been talking about in the NBA, right, devaluing some of these flawed stars, but in the NFL, like, I really do think that superstars swing big games, and I think that having a player like Trent McDuffie was a key component of the Chiefs' Super Bowl formula in these more recent years. And I think if you look at the best defenses in the NFL, who were some of the best teams in the NFL this year, like, what do they have in common? Pretty much a combination of elite corner play and elite pass rush. That's what Seattle and Houston and Denver all very much have in common. The Patriots didn't have an elite pass rush. They had elite corner play. So obviously this is one of the most important positions on the football field. It was the biggest need for the Rams, and they got one of the most consistently elite players at the position. It just feels to me like with all the offensive firepower they have, where they're clearly still the most stacked offense in football, when you usually get talent at every position, the play calling that they have, they are loaded. Unless Stafford like meaningfully regresses, and by that I don't mean he doesn't throw for 4,700 yards and 40 plus touchdowns. I'm talking about like if he actually takes a step back in a way that matters for this team. Unless that happens, it feels like this makes them the favorite for now. And by the way, as much as they've been trading around firsts willy-nilly for years, they still get to pick 13th in this draft. So this is another chance they have to add a high-end talent. They have drafted well when given the opportunity. You mentioned how much they've rebuilt this defense through the draft. So I just think the pass rush is already elite here. And now you have at least one elite corner in that secondary. And just, again, lowers the bar for everybody around him. So I like the aggression from the Rams. Just philosophically, I love the Rams' aggression. I think Les Snead has done a really good job. I think it's a big reason they've been among the most successful teams in the NFL in this past half decade.
I just believe in I just want to say I just believe in the Rams' ability to evaluate talent. And so if there's a guy that they really buy into and believe in, I just kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I think about a guy like, we're talking about them rebuilding this defense up, finding a guy like Nate Landman, who was undrafted, finding a guy like Omar Spates, who was undrafted. You know, it's a part of them drafting exceptionally well, but interrelated with that is them just being able to identify talent and know guys who are going to be impactful. I think they're one of the best in all of the NFL. And so
for real,
if they think that McDuffie is going to be the guy that puts him over the top, then I'm going to say that the Rams are probably right.
Well, they have good reason to think that. I mean, the guy's really done nothing but play elite football for years. For the Chiefs, I do get this. I get the philosophy of wanting lots of chances at quality, cheap young players in the draft. I get wanting to free up some cap moving off of what was going to be a big contract. I do just worry about the talent level of this defense, though. And like I said, McDuffie has been a big game-swinging superstar for them, right? The Chiefs haven't always had the most talented rosters top to bottom, but when they're winning Super Bowls, it's because they have the superstar factor. They have Patrick Mahomes. They have prime Travis Kelce. They have Chris Jones defensively. They have Trent McDuffie, and that factor has obviously regressed for them in a big way with Kelce's regression and now McDuffie being gone. And he's only 25. That's a huge component here. Like, this is a guy who is a long-term building block for you. This is like similar to the Sauce Gardner trade in that way, where you're not just paying for an elite player right now. This is a guy who is a part of your future too. The Rams are definitely focused on that short-term window, as they should be, but McDuffie goes beyond that if they want him to. It's just not necessarily easy to recreate that value in the aggregate, is my concern with the Chiefs. And we've seen them previously let dudes in the secondary walk, going all the way back to Charvarius Ward, but we saw it with L'Jarius Sneed. We saw it last year with Justin Reed, and they've mostly been okay. But I do think that McDuffie is a different kind of player from the rest of those guys. I do think this now means they really, really should pay Jalen Watson, which philosophically you wonder, I mean, if you're going to trade McDuffie, does it make sense to pay Watson, or are you just off paying like corners these big second contracts? I don't know. I just think it's such a gamble in the secondary if they lose both in one offseason when that group already has some real questions. I just don't know where I'm at with the Chiefs. Like, I think for a while this was a pillar of organizational excellence, and Andy Reid and Spags, the coaching so brilliant, and I think that Brett Veach was doing a better job building in the earlier years of the Mahomes era. And in recent years, I just don't know. This roster definitely has gotten worse over the last 2 years. And I'm not super confident that they are going to be able to rebuild more value with these extra picks and cap flexibility than just like the sure thing elite value that you got from Trent McDuffie. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a little puzzling to me just because, you know, we just saw them cut Jawan Taylor as well, which is going to save them $20 million. So it just seems like this is a bit of a hard reboot for Kansas City, which is going to put extra pressure on them to really crush these draft picks with immediate impact guys. And that's what I want to stress is like it's not about them finding you can find talent in the draft. It's that you need to find guys that can contribute and play immediately. And it's also the really harsh reality of building around a star quarterback that you have paid a bunch of money. I think Patrick Mahomes is one of the greatest talents to ever play the position. Anytime you pay a guy $50+ million a year, it's going to stress the rest of your roster. You know, we always talk about Tom Brady and how he was willing to sacrifice for the rest of the roster. And like you mentioned,
money. He had that Giselle money. Let's be real.
The Chiefs will, and the Steelers did this every single year with Big Ben too. The Chiefs are going to be able to pull strings that reallocate the QB money to where you can. There's always little things that you can do to open up cap space. But again, like you're saying with McDuffie, when you give up a sure commodity, a known asset, a guy that is going to give you great snaps on that side of the field, you got to replenish. And you've got to get that with immediate impact guys. And when you just look at the staples of the Chiefs, right, year by year from their Super Bowl iteration year over year, Tyreek Hill, gone, right? Been gone. They were able to sustain. You know, they paid that money to Chris Jones and Travis Kelce. Kelce's gotten a lot worse. Kelce is not the guy that he was 2 years ago. Chris Jones, I think, has gotten a little bit worse Chris Jones was up there for the best defensive players on planet Earth 2 years ago. When we talked about T.J. Watt, Myles Garrett, Chris Jones was right up there as the most impactful defensive lineman in football. I don't think he's up there anymore. And so I just think the Chiefs have regressed in a little bit across the board from these staple positions. And I don't know, man. I just don't look at them as dominant and as scary as they were. And I wouldn't even say that, and again, it's easy to say this, that, you know, we're a year removed from them missing the playoffs. I'm just not confident that this is even going to be a playoff team next year with how hard their division is and how much I like the Chargers and the Broncos. This is just clearly a team that is in a hard reboot and a hard reset. And like you said, man, it just puts extra pressure on this team to make sure that they hit on every single one of these draft picks and that they can play right now. And it's easier said than done, man. If I was a Chiefs fan, I would not like the spot that I'm in right now.
Yeah, I do have mixed feelings because obviously this is a roster that's been regressing. This is a roster that needed a lot of talent replenishment, and the best way to do that is give yourself a lot of bites at the apple. Give yourself a lot of picks and a fair amount of cap, even if that means moving off of a known superstar. But that does make me nervous. There was no world in which this was not going to be a massive offseason for the Chiefs. Like, they had to crush this offseason. That's the reality. The talent on this roster has just gotten worse. And I don't want to overreact to Veach's recent draft record and say that makes me like less bullish on what your willingness should be to take on draft picks, because I just think generally, right, having more draft picks, it's a good thing, and there's variance in drafts, and there's always going to be misses, and sometimes you're on a heater, and sometimes you're on a cold run, and it doesn't necessarily always speak purely to your ability as a drafter. But the Chiefs' last 3 drafts have sucked, right? 2022, they crushed, and they got Trent McDuffie, and they got Jalen Watson, and maybe both those guys will be gone after this offseason, and since then, they just haven't kept up the level of replenishing talent that is needed to remain a Super Bowl caliber team like they had been year after year previously. And that's really what has come back to bite them here, and that's now what they need to find their way out of. And if they think, hey, we just need a shit ton of draft picks and cap to do that, I can see that angle. It's all going to come down to execution. Like, that's what's tricky about this deal is we are going to frame it going forward on, did you make the most of moving off of Trent McDuffie, or did you squander that opportunity? Because you had a great player. You knew you had a great player. You also knew that you needed to add a lot of talent. So did you execute is ultimately what is going to be the determining factor with this deal. Maybe that's obvious, but it really, really does feel like that's the case here. There's another big story, Logan, in the NFL. Not Geno. We'll get there. But there's another quarterback who has been released, much more surprisingly so. I suppose, obviously, there's been a lot of tension and a lot of discord between this guy and this organization, but nevertheless, Kyler Murray is going to be cut this coming week. He is going to be a free agent, and all of his contract is going to be paid essentially by the Arizona Cardinals because it has offsets. So whatever amount the new team that brings him on pays him gets subtracted from what the Cardinals have to pay him. No matter what, he's getting his $36 million. It's just a question of who was paying him what amount. And so obviously Kyler and his new team are both going to be incentivized to say, hey, you come play for the minimum for us, and Arizona's going to eat all that money. So what do you make of this, Logan? And what sort of opportunity does this present for any particular teams that you would most like to see go out there and get Kyler?
I mean, it's a huge opportunity. Kyler Murray is the big fish in this free agent class. If you were in need for a quarterback, say what you want about Kyler, the QB, he is far and away the best talent and definitely going to be the best starter out of this free agent class. I mean, beyond Kyler Murray, your next best options on the market are the likes of Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Malik Willis. Geno, I think Geno is probably – Geno or Kyler will be one or two, depending on what you think of them. But
it's definitely going to be Kyler.
Rodgers is a mobile. Russell Wilson is has just the deep ball. Malik Willis is kind of an unknown commodity, right? You don't know how much money he's going to get paid. He's looked great in his opportunities and snaps for Green Bay, but it's like we've seen quarterbacks get overpaid from a few good games, right? I immediately think back 15 years ago to like Matt Flynn getting signed off of one game for Green Bay, Elvis Grbac getting signed. Like, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be that team that gets suckered into signing a guy that has limited tape and was in a great offensive system with LaFleur. I'm rooting for Malik Willis, and I hope he performs well as a starter for whatever team takes a shot on him. But he's a little bit of a less-known commodity, whereas with Kyler, sure, he may have athletically regressed in terms of speed and acceleration and agility from where he was 5 years ago, pre all of these injuries. But again, he is still the most talented guy on the market. So
yeah,
I would just be willing to make that play for him. And when you look at the QB-needy teams, there's a lot of teams that should be intrigued, that should be interested. I don't know if they're going to do it. If I was the Atlanta Falcons, that would be who I would be targeting. And Atlanta would be the team to me that you've got all this talent, you've got all this infrastructure, you've got the new head coach in with Stefanski, and they to me are the team that is like the most needy, where like you just don't want to waste this offensive skill position talent with a Michael Penix, you know. And I guess also Kirk should be another one of the, because it's not like Kirk's going to roll into this season with Atlanta. As old and as shitty as Kirk is, he's still probably one of the top 10 QBs available on the market for one of these teams. He should go as a backup. But, like, you know, I look at Miami and New York, and those are uninspiring spots to me if I'm a Kyler Murray. I wouldn't want to go play for the Pittsburgh Steelers if I'm a quarterback, and the Rodgers is probably holding them.
What about there's one team that you're missing? Minnesota. Come on. Kyler to the Vikings. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, I like that deal.
See it? See it? Picture it. Hold on. Visualize it. Are you seeing it now? Are you tingling like I'm tingling?
It's between them and Atlanta. I think both of those teams should be willing to go after him. I just wonder about Minnesota and the McCarthy. Like, are they going to delude themselves into still thinking that McCarthy could be the guy?
Bro, they were thinking about Tua. They're off JJ. I think they've seen the light there, and they realize we built this win-now-condemning roster. We fucked this up horribly, and now they have such a unique opportunity. They have such a unique get-out-of-jail-free card.
It's a lifeline. It is. It's a lifeboat, you know? Like, it could potentially get them out of the horrible pickle that they've put themselves in. But I just look at the offensive talent in Atlanta, and I would feel like I need to not from a Kyler perspective. I would just be more willing to throw more assets than Minnesota has if I'm the Falcons.
Nobody has to throw any assets. All they have to do is say, hey, Kyler, we're the best destination. I mean, somebody's going to pay him $1.3 million. That's it. That's the totality of it.
Yeah, I mean, those are the two landing spots if I'm those teams that I would be I'd be going all out to go and get Kyler. I mean, he is clearly the best quarterback on the market, and it's really rare that this kind of opportunity all comes together. A quarterback this talented on a contract this cheap.
It's insane. Like, this is truly an incredible opportunity for some quarterback-needy team that has an otherwise win-now roster specifically. And Atlanta meets that criteria. I think Minnesota meets that criteria best. That's where when people are like, the Jets, I'm like, I hope not. Like, that would just kind of be a waste of this really cool, unique experiment that we could see this year.
You just made a great point with it. The reason that we don't even bring up teams like that is not because those teams don't need quarterbacks. Kyler has all the cards in his hand because he's going to get paid his money, so he's only going to go to a spot that is the best, obviously.
Exactly. He's got his pick of the litter, at least everybody who wants him, and everybody who needs a quarterback is going to want him pretty much because there's no cost. We talk so much. It's been the story of the NFL, arguably, over the last couple of years. These quarterback rehabilitation stories, these quarterback rejuvenation stories, these guys who in their second, third chance in a new system with a new coach, with new talent, as they've had more years to sit and really learn the game at an NFL level, they bounce back and they produce at a level we've never seen before. And teams are becoming more inclined to go out there and try to find those guys on the market. This is totally unique because this is a quarterback who has already shown he can play at a high level. This isn't Mac Jones. This isn't Sam Darnold before he goes to Minnesota. This is a guy who is a massive talent. This is a guy who has previously been in top 10 quarterback conversations who you can get for the minimum. Like, regardless of what you think of Kyler, regardless of what you think of some of his limitations as a passer from inside the pocket, right? Some of his limitations throwing over the middle of the field and inconsistencies, and maybe you don't like that he plays COD, whatever, man. If you're Minnesota and your options are J.J. McCarthy or Kyler Murray on the minimum, like, there should be no considerations other than Kyler is the way better talent. At the very least, we can call it a quarterback competition and JJ can get his ass beat. Like, no disrespect to 9. No disrespect to 9. But that's what would happen. If he doesn't go to a spot like that, I'll be pissed. If Minnesota doesn't get Kyler or Geno, and I understand people say, Geno, he threw so many picks. Geno sucks. First of all, watch your mouth. Watch your goddamn mouth. Second of all, Geno has an opportunity to do a reverse Sam Darnold, okay? He goes to Minnesota. Sam takes his job in Seattle. Geno gets ruthlessly booted out of there. Now he has to hit rock bottom with the Raiders. Now he goes to Minnesota. He has a rehabilitation arc. He has a bounce back season. Like, I can totally see it. Are you kidding me? I know we joke about Geno, but I do love the guy. And I don't think he fell off as hard in 1 year as the numbers say, because he had the worst play calling, the worst offensive line, and the worst run game in football. Like, he was put in offensive hell. So do I think you can still get good value out of Geno in a good system? I don't know how I made this about Geno, but I found a way to do it. Like, him in Minnesota, I think they'd be a contender. Like, if that happens, I will be in on Minnesota stock. I will be in on Geno bounce back stock. Maybe I don't have a choice. I've already invested so much in Geno, but I genuinely do believe that. I just think, like you said, dude, it's a life raft. It is a potential lifesaver for a team that built one of the best rosters in the NFL. That's what the Vikings did. And then completely bungled quarterback, let a Super Bowl winning quarterback walk, regressed from a 14-win team just because JJ was that bad. You don't have to be that good as the Vikings quarterback for this to be a really good football team. They won 9 games last year. With 9. They still have Brian Flores. Like, there's so much here that you can work with. You have one of the best receiver talents in NFL history who is fucking just waiting to actually get the ball again. And a good receiving core overall, and a good offensive mind, and an elite defense. If it's Kyler, if it's Geno, Kyler is the best option. Like, Kyler is definitely a more sure thing. You know, Geno made some very shaky decisions last year, and he's older, and I think the league should rightly be higher on Kyler. But either one, I would be like, hell yeah, Minnesota. That's the team I'm looking at, and if they don't get either one, it'll be very disappointing to me.
Both of those teams, I think Atlanta and Minnesota should be going all out to get. I think both of Kyler and Geno should go to both of those spots. In Minnesota also just needs to do it because of Justin Jefferson. I completely agree. Like,
yeah,
there's going to become a point where this becomes like Randy Moss on the Raiders with Andrew Walter throwing him the ball, and Jettas goes, look, you guys clearly don't know what you're doing at the quarterback position. You don't know how to evaluate it, and I'm tired. And you can't run that risk. Like you said, you have all these pieces in place. I thought Flores was gone. I thought he was guaranteed to get a head coaching spot. I wish the Steelers had hired him. It would have been awesome. I would have done a jig and a dance on camera. It would be electric. I would be optimistic about Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but fortunately for the Vikings, that keeps their Super Bowl window alive. The only reason they won 9 games last year was because obviously they're talented, but mostly because of the coordinators and the elite coaching staff, still one of the best in football. They won 9 games in spite of 9 playing for them. Like, I completely agree, man. Minnesota should do everything in their power because they didn't only lose Darnold. They let Daniel Jones walk, too, who had a career year with Indianapolis. Like, it's so far and away their biggest position of need, and the worst thing they could do is not address it or get a guy who is in this McCarthy tier of quarterbacks. And that is it. That would be an absolute disaster and a middle finger, I think, to the fans of Minnesota.
They spent last season like a team that wanted to win the Super Bowl, and they approached the quarterback position like a team that, thought they had a guy who they just didn't have. They thought, hey, we've solved it. We've got the roster everywhere else, and we've got a quarterback on a rookie deal, and that quarterback sucks. So they just have to move with such urgency here because this is like a potential catastrophic moment in the history of their franchise, right? Going from Darnold to McCarthy, it's like, what if the Warriors chose Monte Ellis over Steph Curry? I'm not saying that Sam Darnold is Steph Curry, of course, but you look at like some of these sort of sliding door moments that are so pivotal for a team that can go the right or the wrong way. This one went the wrong way. They picked the wrong guy, but they have an opportunity to salvage it now, and I hope that they do it. So I've got all eyes on Minnesota here. Logan, before we go, I do want to say some parting words for Geno Smith. I wrote a poem, and I already put this on Twitter, but if you'd allow me to do a reading for a moment. Wrote him off, yet he did not write back. A genius set up by the silver and black. Couldn't protect, couldn't run the ball. Put in his shoes, any man would fall. But alas, old friends, we've been here before. Old Geno shall rise up to glory once more. Geno till the day I die. Geno plushies till the day I die. And for the Raiders, you did the right thing. But my honest football take, what should the Raiders do? Trade the pick, man. Trade the pick.
100P.
Mendoza
100P.
is not a franchise savior.
Oh,
the Raiders need a franchise savior. They are better off getting a boatload of assets than dropping that poor boy into this fucking football situation.
They're going to fuck him, man. They are going to ruin his NFL career if they send him to Vegas.
Yeah, no question. And that's what's going to happen. They're not going to trade the picks. The Raiders don't get enough hate. The Raiders are the Browns. The Raiders are the Jets. For the last 20-plus years, they have been worse.
Well, I think the Raiders and the Jets are my bottom two. The Browns are bad, man. Like, they stink. Holy shit. I think the Raiders and the Jets are just the absolute bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, good take. Well, anybody is the bottom of the barrel if they let Geno go and if they fail Geno so badly. So bigger and better things on the way for Geno. By the way, I would have liked to write a much longer poem, but Twitter wouldn't let me. So the limitations of technology, I guess. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, of course, there's plenty more Nerd Sesh content. Check out all of our full episodes on the NBA and the NFL across our YouTube channel. You can also find the video essays we do there. As I mentioned, I did one on the Hornets, the Celtics recently. Got another one coming out soon, so stay tuned for all of that. You can listen to the show across all audio platforms, and you can follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh to see all of our daily viral content over there. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Hope you enjoy some basketball. Hope you enjoy daylight savings time, I guess. And I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.